Hello, everybody. I'm John Felt. Welcome to the Ag Weather Outlook for January 16th, 2016. Now, here's the precipitation that fell over the eastern part of the U.S. over the last 7 days. Over the Corn Belt, precipitation was fairly light. I mentioned it'd be a fairly quiet week, but that precipitation over Indiana and Ohio did cause some problems in the form of some light snow in spots. Also, if you look on the lee side of the Great Lakes, you see some enhanced precipitation, and that's typical as the wind flows over the lake and enhances lee side snow. Now, if we look at the percent of normal here, you can see that that band here did have above normal precipitation, but a very large part of the region here well below normal precipitation, a fairly quiet week. Now let's take a look at snow here. And like I said, there was a bit of snow here. The orange dots are indicating over 4 inches, generally 4 to 6 inches in a few spots. Quite a bit of light snow, which is very typical in the middle part of winter here. A couple inches here and there. It doesn't take a whole lot to wring out the atmosphere and produce maybe an inch or so snow. And I think we're going to see that this week quite a bit. But generally light snow. But look on the lee side of the lakes here. It's really ramped up in this region, in some cases over 2 feet of snow. So definitely a lee side lake effect snow week, especially on the east side of Lake Michigan. Now you might be interested where the snow is currently on the ground, and here we go. This is a satellite estimate. And generally 2 inches to 10 inches. The darker shades of blue are closer to the 10 inches, generally 2 to 4 inches in the medium shades, and a couple inches in the lighter shades. Again, you can see heavier snow near the Great Lakes, but this is the southern extent here, this current snow band, the current snow track right here. Now, it's also very important to keep an eye on the water equivalent of that snow cover, how much, if it would be melted, how much liquid accumulation. And generally from a ½ inch to up to 2 inches here, this darker shade of blue here, looks like some very light purple in here maybe, but this is generally up around an inch on an average, maybe 1.5 inches right in this area here, maybe a little bit heavier here in North Dakota, but many other areas much lighter, only about a ½ inch to a ½ inch. So not a real strong consistency. It's not like the whole area is socked in with that water equivalent, a little bit more spotty. Now the theme of today's briefing is going to be shown in this graphic here. This is the Arctic Oscillation, and if you listen to me a lot in my briefings and in my text that I send out, my content, I talk about the Arctic Oscillation usually in wintertime. Generally speaking, what the Arctic Oscillation is, it gives some idea of maybe one way to look at it, the position of the jet stream, but areas of high and low pressure, how they're distributed over the northern hemisphere. And when the Arctic Oscillation is negative, and this is the neutral line right here, so when it's negative, it goes below that line, the eastern half of the U.S. generally has colder weather, and when it's positive, it's generally warmer. And there are a lot of exceptions there. That's general. So far this winter, you can see here, we've been primarily positive. Now, the black line is the observed. And so you can see over the last week or so, we've really had this abrupt change to a negative Arctic Oscillation, very pronounced. And then it looks like here's the forecast. It looks like as we get into the latter part of January, it returns back close to normal, not necessarily positive. These are individual model runs. This gives us some idea of the spread. So when it's very close together, a high degree of confidence, and not so much when we get further off in week 2, and that's normally what you'd expect. So that's the big picture. Let's look at the details. Here's the jet stream this week, and we have this big dip in the jet stream over the eastern half of the U.S., and that's going to mean cold, 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 especially early this week. That's that deep dip in the Arctic Oscillation into negative territory. Now, the good news is, for the Midwest at least, is that there aren't going to be any real strong surface low tracks. These are the low tracks. Now, if you are along the from the mid-Atlantic up into especially the northeast U.S., there is one just off the coast, and that could be quite messy in that region. Also in the northern parts of the Great Lakes, but no real strong surface low tracks. On the other hand, it is going to be very, very cold. These are temperatures, departures. For the average for the week, we're looking at 10 to 20 degree temperature below normal over the upper Midwest. Over the eastern Corn Belt, not quite so much, more like 5 to 10. but pretty much the entire Midwest for the average for the week, it looks like it's going to be unusually cold. Now the cold temperatures look like they're going to peak early this week, most likely Monday morning in most areas, but Sunday morning, Monday morning, Tuesday morning. But we see sub-zero temperatures over a very large area on Monday morning. After that, it's going to be a gradual moderation. It's going to still be below normal almost the entire week, but it looks like the very coldest air will be coming early. Now, I mentioned as far as precipitation goes this week, overall pretty light. Now, it doesn't take much precipitation to get a little bit of snow. So even just a tenth of an inch of liquid precipitation can provide an inch of snow. So I do think there'll be some snow flurries, some snow showers around. But the liquid accumulation is going to be very light for the most part. Now some areas, problem spots, again, along the lee side of the lakes, we're going to have much more significant and heavier snow. Parts of the northeast U.S. And then if you're out in the western U.S. For some reason, very, very, very wet week in the west. Sort of interesting here, this pattern here is really missing Southern California that could use some needed precipitation for the extreme drought in that area. Now I wanted to show you the snow forecast. This is going to be the next 7 days, and they're going to be streaks. And I wanted to point out that these streaks are going to be a northwest to southeast. So if you're looking at the interactive radar this week that you can get information on the very last slide, I'll show that to you. But you'll be seeing the systems coming from the northwest to the southeast. And these are not tapping into deep moisture. So again, this is that light snow, but it could accumulate to an inch or two in any given spot, maybe even a little bit heavier in a few spots, but generally very light snow. And this is coming in 2 or 3 different events as we go through the week. Now this is the, after I talk about the very cold air this week, that's the weather story. Let's look out a little bit further. This is January 21st through 26th, and look at this. Now you might recall, a month or so, I guess, I said I wasn't convinced that this pattern was really going to be locked in. It looked to me like through much of January, but here we get into the latter part of January, and it looks like a moderation. It looks like that jet stream begins to gradually work its way back a little bit more to the north, and thus temperatures, at least according to this model, in the 6 to 10 day period, mainly starting late this week and going into next week, come back fairly close to normal. Now, I've seen this in the past, and I'm not 100% convinced yet. We're going to have to sort of keep an eye on this. I'm not sure if they're actually going to warm above normal, but I do think it looks like there's going to be some moderation. And then as we get into the latter part of the month, again, pretty much normal weather. And you can see that in the temperatures in the 11 to 15 day time frame, most areas fairly close to normal. In fact, when I look at one of the models here, this is on January 31st, way out there. And look at this. This is saying temperatures could be much above normal at that time. That's way out there, so let's don't get too carried away with that. But I think at least from the weather models that I'm looking at, look like this cold intrusion of Arctic air is going to be maybe a 5-day period. And then after that, it looks like we could get back to more of a typical type winter and maybe even some periods of above normal. Now, week 2, the period of this trend of generally below normal precipitation looks like it's going to continue. And matter of fact, days 8 to 14 right now look like they're going to be quite dry. I don't see any major snowstorms, and I don't really see any major precipitation. Doesn't mean we're not going to get some. Okay, so here's your alerts this week. Much below normal temperatures, mainly early in the week. And the trends, very cold much of this week. It'll peak early, and it'll gradually be moderating a bit towards the end of the week. We're going to have several pushes of light snow moving from the northwest to the southeast, but precipitation is still likely to average below normal both this week and next. And then a possible moderation trend starting most likely late this week or this up next weekend, and then continuing right through the end of the month of January. Now, with a little bit of snow around, you might want to track the snow, and here you go. We have a really nice, good radar, interactive radar that I use myself, agweatheradvisor.com/radar. Bookmark that. Take a look at the radar as that snow comes through. I think you'll like that radar. Hope you all have a great week. I'll be talking with you again next weekend.